It's Mark and Pete.
Hello and welcome to the show. More colourful conversations with Mark and Pete. That's right, the Brexit edition. Welcome everyone. This is the show dedicated to talking about Britain's vote to leave the EU. And what is the consequence? Well, yes indeed. Yippee, we're out. So, the country's biggest decision in more than a generation has ushered in a new era of great uncertainty. Well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for you? Well, the country's relationship with mainland Europe is clearly now going to be transformed. But that isn't necessarily going to be a quick decision. Well, we'll talk about the consequence and possibly some of the technicalities. Well, let's just shape what that really means. And some people do have a fear factor as the fact that we've now voted to leave. Well, here's a quick little poem just to set the conversation going. It's called Taking the Plunge. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. The UK plunges to quit and leave. The European Union starts to grieve, wiping a tear upon its sleeve. When first we practice to deceive, and last we perform and believe, the Euro project begins to aggrieve from results they did not perceive. With heavy hearts they do heave, all hoping for a last reprieve. The bureaucrats cannot conceive commiserations they now receive. So, standing upon a new Europe's eve, the UK's independence right to retrieve, the markets ask, what does this achieve? A defiant act, or one inherently naive? Well, with me today is Clergyman Pete, with, yes, the smile that stretches as wide as the Channel Tunnel. So then, Clergyman Pete, what's your view on the fact that we voted to exit Europe?
Well, Mr. Mark, my response is, yippee, we're out! If only that were true. We're on our way out, it seems, but it's good news.
So you're slightly pleased, then?
It's a good decision. It did seem all along that it was going that way, certainly the last week or so leading up to the vote in the referendum, but it's good news, and the ramifications of it long term could be brilliant.
Just explain to our listeners why not remain? What was the point of leaving?
It's really good news. Really good. It's good news because, of course, what it will do is make you listen to Mark and Pete on this show about it. But aside from that, excellent and very important part of why it's good news. Well, here's some important points. First, fish. Now, this is often not mentioned as one of the first things you would talk about. It may be listed further down, but the fishing industry of Great Britain has been decimated by membership of the EU. It was famously signed away at the last minute when coming to an agreement over the European Economic Community. It was a terrible thing to do. The massive fish stocks that we have around Britain have become a shared commodity, and we get a tiny amount. And it resulted in the end with the EU paying fishermen whose livelihoods going back generation was fishing, and the boats that went out to fish, paying them to destroy their boats. It's terrible. And we now have a chance to reclaim those fish and to reclaim that industry. So number one, fish. Second, sovereignty. I mean, the thing is that the EU was set up to pool sovereignty. The whole idea was that it would be a central, permanent bureaucracy immune to democracy, because democracy had been bad. It threw up the Nazis. So you see why they did it, but that's why it ended up bad. It leached away Britain's sovereignty and its democracy to a large extent. So, the third thing is immigration, because of the EU policy of people being able to not just work in other countries but stay there. It ended up with a lot of people coming to live in Britain in large numbers, and that needs to be controlled, not stopped, but controlled. Free movement of labour, which we may well discuss later, is a good thing, but absolute uncontrolled immigration is a bad thing. And finally, bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is just horrible. And the EU is like a giant bureaucratic machine spewing out regulations. And those regulations apply to all of our industry, whether or not we apply to EU. About 5% of our industry actually exports to the EU, but all of it, 100% of our industry, has to comply with the rules. It's terrible.
Stifling.
Stifling, yeah. Just like a wet blanket thrown over our industry. So as we escape from the overweening bureaucracy, as we manage to control our immigration to reasonable levels, as we get back democracy, so the government we actually vote in can actually make all the laws and actually govern the country. And when we get our fish back, and our fishing industry back, this is going to be great over the next years. Not immediately, but over the next years, we're going to see that Brexit is brilliant.
Well, let's just try and dry out that large wet blanket, and then let's just see what we can do with it. Because actually, ironically, although the UK has actually decided to leave the European Union, technically it has to be triggered by what's called Article 50. This is essentially the formal act of which the British government has to approach the European Council. Now, this has to be done both in terms of either a speech, that's a formal speech, and also in the form of writing. Now, we haven't done it yet, but I guess that what will happen is that over the forthcoming weeks and months, Britain will start to trigger that particular article. But there are a lot of people who are extremely concerned about what this effect is having on, say, for example, business or the markets, as I indicated earlier. So, for example, what we have seen is the plunge in the pound. What we've also seen, and I've actually seen this in business as well, that a lot of foreign workers who have been working in Britain, mainland Britain, who are concerned that they feel that, first of all, maybe it's an emotional reaction, but they've taken it as a personal snub, as if the British don't want to deal with them. And the other one, of course, is that we are seeing some indications that some of the entrepreneurs who are looking to invest in Britain start to sort of think, well, do they want to do that long term? Now, maybe these are certain short-term reactions, but I guess the question then would be, what will be the long-term reaction? So I want to talk about what some people would see as the consequence of leaving. Now, this is a little poem called A Giant Mistake. Fee, fi, oh, what fun, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, beware of the way he's really bred. Fi, fo, fiddle-dee-dee, lots of trouble from across the sea, be it Germany or even France, waging war or being led a dance. Fo, fee, hear the groans, the Euro-giant will crush his bones. Be it slow or be it quick, squeeze him hard until he's sick. Fum, fam, he's run away, watch his welfare soon decay. Now Union Jack will lose his means, left with rotten, sad old beans. So, has the fear factor set in now? Was it a giant mistake? So let me ask you, Clergyman Pete. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who are saying, oh, what we've really done is undermined our economy, and from now on, we've been cast adrift.
Well, yes, it's that has been the fear factor of that has been something that's been featuring large in the Remain campaign, and since the vote has been taken, there's been such vituperative, angry nonsense talk about how the economy has now been destroyed. The thing is, this argument was rejected by the majority of voters. That's the whole point. We've now made a decision. But why isn't that true? Well, because what we're not talking about is isolationist Britain, so threatening trade. That's not the decision that was made. The decision that was made was to end being part of a political union. It's something completely. It's a misunderstanding of what the exit from the EU would mean. We don't know exactly what it would mean. So I do take the point that what you're looking at is uncertainty, and if you want total certainty,
let me pick up on that
is a
because
problem. Yeah.
Let me pick up on that and answer this question, which is Nicola Sturgeon, who's the Scottish First Minister, has automatically mentioned that this will now prompt an immediate discussion about effectively a referendum on two things. First of all, whether Scotland should remain as part of the United Kingdom, so that old chestnut has cropped up once again, and whether that Scotland should be still part of the European Union. Effectively, if you do actually look at the votes, listeners, the vast majority of Scotland did actually vote to remain in the European Union. So that's point one. That's consequence one. There is another one, which, of course, as we know, is that people like Juncker, who leader of the European Union, has basically said that Britain should get on with it. Basically, start moving forward with Article 50 and stop delaying. So there are a lot of things that there's a lot of pressure on people so far, from whether it be internally, that's internally in the United Kingdom, pressures in different ways. We're already seeing that David Cameron has already decided to resign. So there again is another consequence. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? So just let's talk about what you think on that front, about, say, the consequence of the United Kingdom breaking up potentially.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think the UK breaking up would be a bad thing, particularly for Scotland if Scotland left, because Scotland can't afford to leave. It has subsidies from the rest of the UK, not from England, from the whole of the UK, but the rest of the UK. They have subsidies, the largest part of which is England. And they cannot afford to leave. Now, the other point is, of course, that they've already had a referendum quite recently in which they decided to stay. And now, if you actually listen to what Nicola Sturgeon said about the having another referendum, she says things like "almost certainly" and "Scots will demand it" and all this sort of thing. She seems to be leaving herself a bit of wiggle room, I think. But anyway,
yes, and needs a lot of wiggle room. Because I agree with you that the Scotland, I don't think economically could survive on its own.
Yes, and it also does say. I don't normally use this word, but I would say it sounds stupid to say we want to leave the UK, but be part of the EU. I mean,
yes.
At least in the UK, they have proper voting rights in a more democratic system in the British Parliament, instead of the window dressing of democracy that there is in the EU Parliament. Now, what was the other point that you said?
Well, I think that the other consequence then, of course, is that we've lost David Cameron. He's already declared that he's going to step aside because, he stood for remaining within the European Union, and he doesn't believe that he's the right man to remain. So effectively that opens up the way for a new Prime Minister.
Well, we are Mark and Pete have never been fans of David Cameron, so we might let out another yippee for that. But I would have...
You did it so well.
I would have thought that... I would have been happy for him to stay, at least to see it through, but I understand why he went. Now, the other point that I've just remembered as I started saying that, you also talked about Article 50 being invoked. Yes. Now, when you invoke Article 50, you then have 2 years in order to negotiate a framework of relationship with the European Union.
Yes. Just for clarification, most analysts say it's a minimum of 2 years. It could possibly take 4, but it will depend on the timing. What my understanding is it can be extended, but that has to beyond 2 years. But that has to be part of the negotiation itself. But certainly, it's at least 2 years. Now, you then be rushed. You see, maybe even if it can be extended to 4 years. You've got to come to decisions, but within a certain time frame. But what you could do instead is delay when you say article and say no. But that's not what Juncker wants.
We're going to wait. And yes, Juncker and the rest of the EU bureaucrats will say, "But this is terrible. It's making uncertainty in the EU." To which Britain can reply, "Yes, but we're not going to be in the EU, so that doesn't really affect us that much."
Exactly.
Unless, of course, you give us what we want. This is called, you see, negotiating. We can negotiate, and Britain is then in a very strong position. If it delays, not too far, but until they get the framework of debate set out, certain principles in place which favour Britain, and of course we want to be fair also to our European partners, the nations. but not necessarily to the EU, because after all, we left because we didn't like it. So,
Yes.
I think
That's
delay
the point,
invoking
isn't it?
Article
Because
50.
I think one of the things that we need to get across is that now we've gone for this card, i.e. to exit the European Union. Surely this is a chance for Britain at last to start putting more efforts on its home front.
Yes. No, let me ask you then, Mark, because you have a lot of experience in business. Now, what would you do there? Now you're in this position, and there's going to be a British government which then is free from the shackles of the EU. Well, what do we do? What do you think they should do?
Well, in my opinion, this is the first time that I've probably seen now for many, many years where Britain has the opportunity to finally focus its efforts on things that have been neglected. For example, if you look at the GDP of Britain over the last 30 years, primarily our manufacturing base depleted. And this isn't something that's left us very, very weak. We're weak both in terms of our manufacturing capability. We've been so reliant on our service-based sector, for example, the banking industry, the insurance industry, etc. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to have a banking industry. Of course we want that. But if you look at the way that we have neglected our manufacturing base, it means that we have relied significantly about foreign investment. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we're not developing enough engineers, whether that's mechanical engineers, chemical engineers. We're not putting enough investment into technology, although people will always argue, yes, we are putting investment into technology. Yes, we are, but it's just nowhere near enough. And so as a manufacturing base, if we were to compare ourselves to somewhere like a model like Germany, which has actually balanced its economy very effectively, it has more of a manufacturing base, but it's not completely reliant on manufacturing. It does have a service sector if you look at the way the GDP is structured. So to me, this card now gives an opportunity for a government to say, let's stop messing about by playing games with a European Union where we're constrained, and we can start setting our own laws with manufacturing, trading with other nations, and actually growing our infrastructure. So that's point one. Point two, which has been a big neglect, is training a generation correctly. So if you look at what the governments over the last 30 years have been trying to do, they've tinkered with the idea of investing in graduates. Now, one of the things that we've seen over the last 30 years is that graduates, one, have been saddled with debt, enormous debt, than ever before. Those people who came through the 1960s, the 1970s, and the 1980s didn't have that problem. And here we are in a world now where we've got a generation of what's often called the lost generation, because they just don't have the opportunities scaled up for them, whether that's job opportunities, better links from academia into industry. So that has to be addressed. So education also has been tinkered around too much. We have to be much more consistent. We cannot continue with fiddling around with the way that we assess people. We've got to invest better and ensure that we retain teachers with the right caliber, with the right qualifications. And we talked about on Mark and Pete how that has been a failing of many governments over the years, right up into the recent one. So that's another thing. And then finally, I think that you did touch upon the fact that there are certain industries, whether it's the fishing industries, agriculture is another one which has been neglected. At one time, it was a powerhouse of our economy, the agricultural industry, certainly in the 60s and the 70s. And certainly over the last 30 years, that's something where we've been importing far too much. We now have the resource. We do have a skill base, but we need to grow it. So to me, what I think that this card has done is, yes, it's provided a bit of uncertainty. But if we start to plan going forward and invest on our home front rather than mess about with foreign affairs that really have no bearing on our society, I think that this is going to work a lot better. And I'm sure there are many listeners who will say, well, wait a minute, there's many other subjects that we can bring up. Well, we'd love to hear from you, because obviously these are the things that we believe now that Britain is best placed to move forward. So, yippee, we're out. Yes, we know there's consequence. Clearly, we're seeing that unfold as we speak today. But maybe it is the platform for at last Britain to take back a bit of ownership, invest in the areas that matter, and start becoming significant where perhaps maybe we've lost that position.
Yes, and I would just add to that the links that it's possible for us to, I guess, reforge with countries in the Commonwealth, in the Commonwealth, which is the old British Empire, the links with the US and Australia could be especially strong. Effectively, building up trade and also political links with the Anglosphere, which has been around for some time. This idea of the Anglosphere, countries that have a similar culture in terms of business and contracts, in terms of law, and in terms of language, are similar and able to understand and get on with each other. Not because they're better than other countries, but because they're similar to each other in their culture. And so I see that could well be part of the future for Britain. Retaining a good working relationship with European countries, but also being able to forge links with countries around the world.
Yep. Well, listeners, what do you think? I mean, without any doubt, this is a decision that is going to affect many a generation. So the UK at some point will trigger a formal negotiations to finally exit the European Union. And what do you think? Why not let us know your thoughts? Log on to markandpete.com and fill out the contact form. We'd love to hear from you. This is a subject that I know that will run and run. So join us next time for more interesting and colourful conversations with Mark and Pete.
Yippee!